Hello educators. In this video lesson 2A we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite activities, what we call breakout teams, and it's an activity that we use Google Slides to make this activity work. And for a quick recap or rundown of what it is, it's really a small group activity where each group is working collaboratively on the same problem. And each group kind of has their own slide in a workbook that everyone has edit privileges for, and they can use their own slide for their team to kind of record their thinking, and a bunch of students work together on the problem at once. We really love this activity if you have a bunch of teachers in your class, multiple teachers, because it's really a great way to get all of those teachers working with students at the same time and kind of a community who's all working on one problem together. And also, hopefully, we're going to show you in this video how it's kind of a quick activity to run in class. Great way to get the day started and students talking to each other, and also how it's pretty easy for us as teachers to create. So without further ado, we're going to take a look here at one example of a breakout team problem from one day. So this is recently in class, and this is part of our whole slide deck that students are in, the same slide deck each day, kind of working through our lesson. And as you'll see here, breakout teams is usually the activity that we start the day off with. It takes about 10 minutes to run through if we do it right. It's got each group of small group students kind of talking about a math problem that leads us into the main ideas for the rest of the lesson that day. So here's an example from day 34, and as you see here, students have a graph. We'll talk about how we created that graph and put that into this problem in a little bit. But students' job, as you see here, as a small group team, they kind of run through a few questions about the graph, like what is the y-intercept for the graph, what is the slope for the graph. And then there's a challenge zone piece too, where students would be able to, as groups, try to create their own different graph here, and you see they wanted a smaller y-intercept and a greater slope, so they'd kind of be able to drag points around, find something that has a smaller y-intercept and a greater slope. So if we take a look for how this actually functions for us in class, this is the page that we have in our main slide deck, and for about 1 or 2 minutes we would launch the problem right here. Just quickly explaining to students, hey, here's the question that we're working through, the problems we're working through, see if they have any questions. But very quickly, within a minute or two, we like to be sending them off to breakout rooms where they're on their own team to work on this problem. So you see down here, this is one of the places we put the link in the chat for students too, to make it easy to get in the workbook. But since this is a view-only document that students are in to start the day, they need to link out to another workbook that has their own team slide. So if students were in the first period, they could go ahead and click this link right here, and it would take them into this workbook, which we're going to show you for a second. This workbook has that problem that we just looked at, and it's duplicated across the same slide for each team. So in this day in this homeroom, we were lucky enough to have 4 total adults for teachers in that room, so we had 4 different breakout teams. And as you see here, we just use a color system on the background of red, blue, green, and purple to help students know which team they're on and which slide they should be working on. So any students who show up with our city year member, who's usually Miss Custodio, but that day it happened to be Miss Schaefer who is filling in for us, they know with city year being in red jackets, they're always on the red team. We're looking for that first slide, the red slide. And after a couple days, it's great. Students know, oh, the blue team is always Mr. Chu, who's fantastic and works with 2 of our classes each day. And students know, oh, if they're in Mr. Doherty's room, my breakout room, that's usually the purple team down at the bottom. This is an easy way for students to quickly join their teammates. And then as a teacher, when we're in the lesson, I and all the teachers can actually see which students are in that purple slide with us helping our team work, and we can actually see as they edit which students are typing in the answers and moving some of the dots around, creating the graphs for us. A few things to be aware of. Yes, students, all of them have edit privileges in this document. There is edit history, so if you do show the students that you as a teacher do have edit history, we haven't really run into issues of students who go and mess with other team slides. To the extent it happened once or twice, we just showed the students, hey, we can see who did that. And then that kind of resolved any issue around students potentially messing with other groups. We encourage students, we don't come back as a whole class anymore and discuss this. We run through the whole problem in our breakout team. That's what students said they preferred. But we do encourage students kind of when we come back to whole class before we launch the rest of the lesson to take about a minute and maybe go look at one other team's answers, and hopefully they're seeing that these other teams got to some of the same answers that they did in their room. So now that we've kind of run through how this looks on the student end, I did want to talk about the teacher end and how we create some of this. So to do that, to facilitate that, I'm going to go ahead and show us something that's about to be created for tomorrow. I thought I had this in here somewhere. There we go. Sorry about the wait. And this one for us is kind of that template you see that I would have created first. That what makes sense mostly for me, what's most efficient, is to create the problem in our main math slides, build the entire problem out here, and then once I've got the problem built the way that we want it for that day, that's when I start to create the copies and the workbooks. So first we'll run through how we created this problem a bit. One thing that you're going to see here, you see this graph here is it's big, it's bold, it's easy for students to read the y-axis numbers and the x-axis numbers, and I actually have a few templates that I'm happy to share with anybody. And these templates kind of make it very easy to make any kind of graphs and make them the way you want them, with whatever slope or y-intercept you want, and also just to make it more visible for students. So these templates sit in Google Drawings. We just took a table, for example, a 12 by 12 table, and then played with some of the grid lines to make it a nice, perfect, even graph. And now once we have a template like this, we can go and play around and move this line anywhere that we want, put any dots that we want onto the graph, change the shape of those dots to stars, different things like that. So this template really is what allows us to create the graph that's there. Once we have what we like there, all we do is simply take a screenshot of that graph. On your MacBook, that shortcut is Command, Control, Shift, and 4 all at the same time. But if I hit Command, Control, Shift, and 4, that allows me to take a screenshot that's going to be copied to my clipboard and just take a portion of my screen. That can then be dropped in here, so if this graph weren't here, that screenshot that I just took could be pasted in there. And then to clean things up a bit, we do usually put a border around it to make that pop or to make it clear for students. And we can pick the border color so that kind of stands out or fits the theme with students. So that's how that got in there. And then similarly over here you see the questions that we built out. We do have students interact with this graph. We have students, for example, try to place this purple star onto the y-intercept on the graph. And that is a skill that takes a little bit of time for students to build up, but it's actually been surprising. And breakout teams are nice where if there's 5 or 6 students, usually one of them is comfortable to struggle through figuring out how to move these points around on Google Slides. And then more kids will grow and get comfortable with it as they get used to that tech. How these points got in here, simply if you take a look up here on the menu right here where you see shape, this is the easiest way to start inserting shapes. So I might just drop a square or anything in here. And when I click once, you'll see this square drops in. They did keep the same purple themed color that I'd used earlier, but if I want to change the color of the shape, that's right up here. And then similarly, if I click secondary click in format options, that allows me to do things like change the size of it. So if I want to maybe make that square smaller, easier to plot exactly on the graph, I can change the width and the height of that square, things like that in format options. Similarly, you see there's a bunch of shapes to pick from. If I didn't like that square, I could secondary click, find change shape, and I could switch that over to a star or a circle or all these other shapes that I might want to choose from. And as far as inserting this box, you'll see here it's very nice when you insert these text boxes to kind of use fill. So if we have a green background, it is nice to fill this text box with white. So what I mean by that really is when I insert a text box, for example like this, this is already popping up with white fill because that's what I did previously. But if it doesn't, if it's transparent, like this for example, it's kind of hard to read what's going on in that box if you want it on the top. So filling with white right here, clicking the fill on with the white kind of helped us make this pop out. And then as far as formatting, you see one last thing that we found that's nice for students is things that they need to answer. We kind of switch the color and the highlighting of the text. Our students know at this point that if they see blue text and blue highlighting, and we'll show you here how that could be done, the highlighting tool's right here. So all we kind of do is we highlight spaces with a light blue color. And then we switch that text color over to blue instead of black, just so it kind of pops out for students and they know, oh, all those blue texts with blue highlighting in the background, those are the areas where I as a student or us as a team are looking to put in our answers. Now as far as duplicating this, that actually is pretty quick and easy. We'll show you that here. So I haven't built this out. This was just made. This is ready for tomorrow's class. And now that I have this in the form that I want, I think this problem's ready to go. I need to duplicate that out for each of my 3 classes. So this is just the old template. I actually borrowed that same slide from before by just copying and pasting it and switching things like day 37 and tweaking the questions in the way we wanted for that day. And now this is that same template that's going to take me into an older workbook, something we did a couple days ago. And since it's an older workbook, the only reason I'm going in there is I want to save this title slide that I use every day. That's easy. And I also want to save a couple of the formatting pieces from just one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy. I don't really go back and look at these much, but we'll go ahead and make sure we just make a copy of the entire presentation. And since this is going to be day 37, all we'd be doing is switching that over to day 37 class workbook, and the rest of this stuff just kind of stays the same for the names. I do like this box here, share it with the same people. That maintains the settings so that all of my students are going to be able to edit this and I don't have to change that again. So this is a nice little option they've added when you make copies of documents. That way the privileges for editing and who it's shared with stays the same. So that takes a second to load up, but the main thing we're going to be doing once this loads up is really just cleaning out the old stuff from the other day and mostly saving this template page. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete all these extra slides that were extra teams from the previous day. We don't need those anymore for the next day. And I'm saving one just because I want to save this little template here and a couple other things from it. But the problem we want students working on was right here. That's what we showed. So we'll go ahead and I'm just using Command-C. As I click on the slide over here, Command-C allows me to copy the entire slide. And then I'm going to click here and I'm just going to use Command-V, or you could secondary click, same thing as Command-V, and use Command-V to paste that in here. It's a little quicker to use your keyboard. And then I'm going to go ahead and prepare this, do a couple quick things. The students don't need this link anymore that pulled them into the workbook, so I delete that. They don't need it. And they also don't need our agenda at the bottom, so I tend to remove that. Now, we do want a couple things here. On the title page, remember we wanted to save this template, but it's a quick update of, okay, we were going to day 37 and tomorrow's going to be Thursday. So we just update those 2 quick things, but now my first period knows their orange team or orange class, and it's nice that they always see, okay, I'm in the right workbook, the orange background at the start. And then this here, which we're going to need to duplicate out, I'm just going to copy that quite a few times. I'm going to use Command-C to copy that slide, and then I'm going to paste it a few times. I'm going to steal this one template right here that I tend to put underneath this, let students know where they're at, and then just use the arrow key to move this down a little bit. Again, the last thing we steal is just kind of this thing that flags which day we're in and that they're the right homeroom. So just update that to day 37. And then at that point, I don't need that old day one. This thing looks good to go. It's ready to go for each team, so I'm going to copy it and paste that out a few times. And then all we're doing, I've got 4 breakout teams, I think, for that class this day with 4 different teachers, so we're just going to simply change the backgrounds to the colors for each of the teams. And that's just there with the changed background. I'm not going to show you this for everybody. But you would see then, too, we would just quickly edit and let them know, oh, this one's room 1. And whichever teacher would be in room 1, we would update that there. So then at this point, it did take about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but now ultimately we've got 4 different slides of this problem. 15 minutes of our class day is now taken care of students that are each in their own rooms kind of working through this problem. And then you'd see here we'd just do the same thing, updating teachers for each of them. The last thing I'll point out, I do think when you drop backgrounds for slides, this is small but cool, I think. Solids don't look quite as good as gradients. There's less choices for gradients, but I do tend to prefer choosing gradients because it just kind of gives a nicer, more professional feel to the slide when it gently rolls its color a little deeper as it goes in the background. Any questions as far as editing any of these things, creating any of this, please feel free to send me a message. At 15 minutes, this first lesson is way too long, so I need to work on not going into too much detail clearly. Thank you for watching to the end if you made it this far. Last thing I should show is my email address, but you have that in this document already. With any questions, of course, my email address, which should have been in this document already, is ddoherty3, and that's at bostonpublicschools.org. So please feel free if you've got questions, ideas, different things like that. I would love to connect with other teachers and talk about some of these things. So again, thank you for watching to the end of the video.